All right, book structure and outline. Let's talk about book structure. We combine the two because they're closely aligned, but we're going to talk about structure first. So scroll down on your outline past the blue section to the orange section. Number one is chapter brainstorming. Structuring a book is a two-step question asking process. There's just two questions. What chapters do I want in my book? How do I organize them into a table of contents or into a book, basically, right? So let me take you through the two steps. The first step is brainstorming your chapters. Let me give you some frameworks for chapter brainstorming. So the first framework is workshop presentation. This is my favorite framework to use when I'm writing a book. Because what I do is I imagine I'm going to teach, like I'm doing now, I'm teaching a workshop on how to write a book. That is exactly how the Scribe method was structured. Is like I literally sat down and I said, okay, if I was going to teach this in a workshop, actually I was guided author. We used to teach that as an in-person workshop, this stuff. And so, like I said, this is the exact workshop the workshop material. And so how would I structure it? And so I literally laid out, okay, the first thing you got to know is this, second thing is this, third is this, and I laid the whole thing out. And it's invariably, it's almost exactly a book. It's never exactly right, because in a workshop, you can kind of open loops and close them the next day, and you can do all kinds of different things that you don't want to do in a book, but it's a very close structure, right? That's my favorite. My second favorite is teaching your book to a friend, right? So imagine that someone who's a friend of yours that you care about has the exact problem your book solves, and they're really interested in listening to anything you want to say. What would you teach them? Right? Like, where would you start? What would be the second thing? What would be the third thing? What are the things you tell them to watch out for? So like, if you just start going through your book, one of those two frames work for like 80-90% of figuring out what are the chapters going to be, right? What's the argument in the book going to be? The third one, this is kind of a catch-all for everyone else, is what do I want to say, right? Because sometimes people, and if you're one of these people, it's totally fine. They don't do well when they have to think in a structured way. So they kind of just have to dump everything out, which is why it's called brainstorming. All right, I want to say this, and I want to say this, and I want to say that. Then no problem. Just put it all down, write it all out in the brainstorming section. Then you can start arranging it, right? Now, the thing to remember for this is you're only brainstorming chapters. You're not brainstorming everything in your book, okay? So real quick, let me answer this because we get this question a lot. What's a book chapter? A chapter can be a single cohesive idea, a step in your process if you are teaching a process, or a single argument or position in your sort of larger argument, right? All right, now below, so that's chapter brainstorming. Below brainstorming, we have a parking lot. This is part of brainstorming too. This is where you put all your really good ideas that do not fit into this specific book. Remember how I told you you're gonna have to make decisions in positioning and you're gonna have to leave things out, right? Parking lots where you leave them. Because here's the thing, I do this all the time. Whenever, oh man, I was just working on another book, and it was like really good. And then I got an idea for a better book. And I spent like 2 hours outlining this other book. I'm in the editing phase of this book and I'm outlining this other book. I'm like, this is brilliant. And then I'm like, oh God, how did I fall into the same trap that I tell everyone else not to do? It's a super normal thing. So any brilliant idea you get put in the parking lot so you know you don't lose it, it's still there if you want it, and then go back to working on your chapter outline. Make sense? All right, let's take 10 minutes right now. I want you to brainstorm all the chapters in your book. If you do that really quick and you want to work ahead, you can. 10 minutes is not much time, and I'm doing this on purpose. I only want 10 minutes because then you can't get stuck in your head. And most people, if they have to do things fast, they kind of get to the core. But if you give them too much time, they start spinning in circles. So 10 minutes max. Step 2, create a table of contents from your chapters. So if you look down part 2 in the orange, it has like just a format. It's got 10 chapters. You don't have to use 10. You can use less or more. I just put 10 because that's our base numerical system is base 10. So I use 10. The table of contents is nothing more than the chapters in order with a thesis sentence explaining each, right? So this is about what it should look like when you're done. Chapter 1, politics, and a sentence. Chapter 2, blind spots, and a sentence. Exactly like that. That's it. Very, very simple, very straightforward, right? Now, a thesis sentence is literally just a summary of what the chapter's about. That's it. So chapter 1, politics. Politics causes all sorts of problems and prevents focus on what matters, and you need to deal with politics even though you don't want to. Okay, I know what the chapter's about. Chapter 2, just like people have blind spots related to areas they need to improve, organizations have blind spots that hold back their performance. Okay, I know what the chapter's about. That's it. That's all it is. Let's take, we're not even going to take 5 minutes, or 10. Let's take 5 minutes here. Start working on table of contents. All you really need to do is if you can put 1 or 2 chapters in, you're good to go. That's it. 1 or 2 chapters into your table of contents, just so you know what it looks and feels like, right? And then you can come back and finish it later. Next, we're going to, again, if your structure's not done, don't worry. I just wanted you to get a taste of it, wanted you to get used to it, so when you come back to it, you can, you kind of know what you're doing, right? Now let's talk about outlining the chapters. This is the hardest part of the workshop, okay? But if you do this work right, it's gonna make writing your book 10 times easier. Now, I'm gonna give you a warning. We do not teach the outline method you learned in school, right? You probably learned this in school. You know, big point A, small point 1, etc. Tiny point I. We don't use this, right? The reason why is because the school outline method is about showing your work. You got to prove that you know something to your teacher so you get a grade. I don't give a shit. Our outline method is about getting the best possible book out of you and getting it done. School's not about results. We're about results. That's what we measure ourselves based on if you finish your book or not, and if your book impacts people. So we have 3 goals for an outline. It's going to help you clarify your book idea. It's going to help you quickly organize your idea, and it's going to provide writing triggers, right? The whole point of the outline, once you get it done, like, okay, you got your ideas clear, you've organized them exactly how you want them in your book. Now, the only point of the outline is when you sit down to write, you know, okay, chapter 2 is about this topic. I want to write about these 4 things in it, and then you go. Make sense? All right, good. So let's go over the outline structure. So if you scroll down beneath the orange section, you can see an example outline structure, right? And so I'm going to go through each. Here's all the different points. I'm going to go through each one. The first part of a chapter is the hook. Now, hook can be anything that gets someone's attention. So it could be a personal story, an historical anecdotes, a question to the reader, any attention grabber, right? So from the book Consulting Economy, I think the book starts off with, or the first chapter starts off with, I'll never forget the first time I learned that consulting was a job. And it goes on to tell the story about how he was, you know, like at a company, and then the consultant came in and people were whispering about the consultant and all that sort of stuff. And so it's like, if you care about consulting in corporations, it's like a somewhat interesting story, right? Now, tomorrow when we do, I'm going to give a whole section on book introductions and conclusions. I'm going to really dive into hooks because there's a lot more there than just that. But I just want you to understand exactly what that part is. Next part is thesis. This is the same thesis that's in your table of contents. That's it. What the chapter's about. Put that there. Next is supporting content. So this is basically all the points you want to make in your chapter. All the arguments, the facts, the figures, the data, your process, the relevant information that the reader needs. The next section are stories, examples. These are the stories you want to tell or examples you want to use to teach the reader. And obviously you want to make them specific and relevant. Now look, we separate stories and content in the outline. Obviously you're going to integrate them when you write the chapters. Like it would be a terrible chapter of like, here's all the information, here's 3 stories. You don't want to write chapters like that. I'll explain why in a second. And then the next is a reader's key takeaway. This is the summary at the end of the chapter that lays out what the reader needs to take from the chapter. So we get this question a lot. What's the difference between a thesis and a key takeaway? The thesis is the argument you're making. The takeaway is the proof. So if I'm saying you've got to engage your employees, the proof is engagement leads to retention, engagement leads to better work habits, engagement leads to whatever, all these sort of things, right? Okay. Here's a even better one. Thesis example, your team isn't listening to you, which when I manage people, which I don't anymore, that was very accurate. The key takeaway, your team's not listening to you because you're not listening to them. Well, also accurate. It makes sense, right? Okay. This is about what it looks like when a chapter outline is 1 page long. So, and I'm not saying your chapter outline has to be 1 page. It can be shorter, it can be longer, whatever, but that's basically, and you don't even have to use bullets if you don't want to. It just makes it easier. That's what it looks like, okay? At the very bottom of the outline is the conclusion and introduction. Don't worry about that. We're going to teach that tomorrow, okay? Now, notice how this is how to outline a chapter to prepare to write. This is not a chapter structure. You do not, like I said, you do not do stories and you do not do information, content, and then stories, right? So why not? Why did we not put this in the structure that you would write it? Well, the reason is we want you to, first off, you really can't. I don't want to say you can't. It's very difficult ahead of time to outline your chapter in the structure you want to write. That requires, quite honestly, an immense amount of writing experience. And so there's not a generic template. That doesn't exist. But the other reason, because of that, and the other reason is we want you to struggle a little bit with putting together your outline, right? And then we want you to struggle some while you're writing each chapter, which is like, that seems fucked up, right? Like, why would we do that? Why would we say, oh yeah, we want to watch you suffer? Well, who knows the story of why the butterfly died? If you know, please don't put the answer in the chat. I'm going to tell the story now. So, so here's basically the story. A grandfather and a kid and the grandson are walking out. The grandson's like 5 years old, the same age as my son. And they find, they're walking along and they find a chrysalis on the ground, right? And the kid gets so excited. He's like, oh, Grandpa, I know you told me we can't touch a chrysalis when they're in the trees, but this one's on the ground and like, you know, it could be stepped on or something. Could we pick this up and take it home and you know, like put it in the right conditions and maybe help the butterfly, you know, hatch? And the grandfather's like, okay, we can do that because it's on the ground. But, you know, and I'll help you get everything set up, but there's one condition. And the grandson's like, of course, anything, I'll do my chores. He's like, no. The only condition is this. When the butterfly starts to emerge from the chrysalis, you can't help it. You have to let it do everything on its own. And the grandson's like, oh, of course, no problem. Of course, I won't touch it. Totally let him do everything on its own. So they set everything up and they get on a cool little dangling rod and they have like a light and everything's perfect set up because the grandfather knows this stuff or they watch YouTube, whatever, but it's perfect. And so they wait and the kid's all impatient and a week passes and finally like he sees it start to move and then it cracks open and the butterfly's starting to come out and he's so excited and he's, you know, 5. He's a 5-year-old boy. So he's like, all right, I can't deal with this tension anymore. I'll just help the butterfly a little bit. Like it looks like he's stuck here. I'm just going to help him a little. And so he doesn't even touch, so carefully, he doesn't touch the butterfly. He pulls a little piece of the chrysalis out. And he's like, well, let me help him. He pulls another piece out and he pops a big piece out. And he's like, all right, that's it. And the butterfly falls out of the chrysalis and lays on the table and struggles a little bit and then dies. And so of course the kid's like just inconsolable, crying and upset. And runs to his grandfather. Grandpa, the butterfly died. I don't know, the butterfly died. And the grandfather looks at him and says, well, did you help it out of the chrysalis? And the kid's like, because he's been told, he always tells the truth. Yeah, I'm sorry, Grandpa. Like, I didn't mean to. It was struggling so much, and I wanted to help it. And the grandpa's like, it's okay. You're not in trouble. But now, do you understand why I told you not to help it? And he's like, no, he didn't understand. He's like, all right, let me tell you why. The way a butterfly strengthens its wings is by pushing its way out of the chrysalis. And so the chrysalis itself acts as the struggle of getting out of the chrysalis is the thing that makes the butterfly strong enough to fly. And so if you open the chrysalis for it, it doesn't have enough resistance and it can't fly. And so it dies. And the 5-year-old says, why the fuck didn't you tell me this before? No, he didn't. That would be funny. That's what I would say. Grandpa, what's wrong with you? But it's a parable, of course. The parable, though, is very important. We're here to help you with your struggle, right? We're not here to prevent your struggle. If we rob you of the struggle of working your ideas out and into a structure, your book dies. It won't be very good if we just have it plug and play. But if you work through this and if you struggle with your ideas and you understand, okay, I think I say this first and then I'll tell this story and then I'll make this point and I'll tell this other story, you're going to have the best possible chapter and the best possible book. This process is hard. There's no way around it. That's what makes it valuable. That's why you get prestige and credibility when you write a book, because most people don't, because it's too hard. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. So we're not going to have you work on that right now. Probably where you are right now on the journey is right here. I'm so confused, right? If you're not, then when you start working on your outline, you're going to get confused. It's just the way it works, which is super normal. Everyone gets confused in the middle of outlining. And then when you're in the middle of outlining, you're almost certainly going to be at peak anxiety. Like you're probably going to be a little bit freaked out. That's normal. That happens to everybody, right? To be expected. I didn't give you anywhere near the time to finish. And even if you do, like it's just how it works. All you need to do from here is keep following the process, right? If you want more personalized help, we're going to explain it tomorrow with Writer's Room and coaching. You don't need it. It's not like a requirement. All the info is here. You can do it without a lot of other people have. But we're going to walk you through that tomorrow too as well.
So there's a question here about how long should it take you to create an outline? It might also be a little hard to understand. Maybe also how long should the outline be? You want to talk about that?
The outline should be, you should not write your book in the outline. It should be relatively short, right? So a couple pages, whatever, not a couple. If you're more than a page per chapter in the outline, it's probably too long, right? Although, to be honest, some people need to put more stuff in their outline. And if you need to put more stuff, that's okay. Just don't, make sure you're not being too anxious. What a lot of anxious people will do is they will write their book in the outline. Don't do that. The outline is just a device to get you to writing. It's not the thing you're trying to accomplish. And there's no way to tell how long it's going to take for you to do your outline. It depends how much time you spend on it, and how hard you work and how well you know your subject and all of that stuff. But I would say at least 2 hours would be like, if you're really dialed in and you know your shit and you know what's going in your book and you've got an organized mind, 2 hours is probably the fastest you can do an outline. I would say the average is probably 3 to 5 hours. So 4 hours is pretty good for most people. Anything over 4 hours, and either you've got a complicated book or you don't quite know it that well, or maybe you're down the wrong path or something. But not always. I mean, we've had plenty of really smart people who knew their stuff well. It took them 5-6 hours. That's fine. That's how long it takes.